Hello, everyone. Hi, freedom fighters in the Australian property chat. Super excited tonight as we have Luke and Rayden, our guest speakers from Super Strategist. Is that correct?
That's right. Thanks for having us.
You're so welcome. And tonight we're going to talk about the key to retiring early. For me personally, what really motivated me to invest in property was because when I realized that my superannuation was not going to be enough to, give me financial freedom, I needed to find another pathway to be able to retire, feeling really, how do I say it, comfortable. I want to have a comfortable retirement. So, Luke, Rayden, tell us, give us some ideas. What's the key to retiring early?
Well, I think, first of all, it's beginning with the end in mind. A lot of people don't think about where the goalposts are sitting. They haven't really thought too much about it. We're happy to just trundle off to work day in, day out. And given that super is such an important part of our lives, and we're very biased, of course, our universe is just the superannuation side of things. But certainly it surprises some people just how much money they do have and some of the options that can be available to them if they just cast their gaze beyond what's done for them as a default setting by most of the major super funds.
Yeah, fantastic. And I've got a few questions just for anyone out there that's considering, setting up a self-managed super fund and investing in property. So I guess my first question is, if you want to buy property in a self-managed super fund, how much do you need to get started?
Thanks, Charmaine. As a minimum, we're probably looking at about 150,000, and anything above that, we can really start to really build that up. Oh, I think I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Build that up over time. So we can start with 150,000, and that's a perfect amount to invest in your first property in your self-managed super fund. Once we have got that first property, that's when we can really start to scale up.
Fantastic. And for our listeners out there, this is your opportunity to ask the experts some questions. So please make sure you type in your questions, anything you want to know about self-managed super funds, investing in property. Please type your comments in the chat. And tell me, if you were to begin a self-managed super fund, how long does it take to set one up? How long does it take for the funds to roll over? What's the process like?
Yeah, sure. To set it up can be quite quick. There are a number of different organisations that we'll have to chat to in that time, but it generally takes around 2 months. 2 months from coming and having a meeting with us and then having your super fund set up.
Fantastic. And so once it's set up, does that the rollover happens within the 2 months, or does it take a little bit longer sometimes for funds to roll over?
Sometimes it'll take around 2 to 3 weeks for that rollover to go from your old fund into your new fund, into your new self-managed super fund, I should say. After that 2 to 3 weeks, we have everything ready, and then you're able to go out and purchase property.
Fantastic. And when you're looking at buying property in a self-managed super fund, are all properties available to purchase in the self-managed super fund? Is there just a selective type of property you can buy? Are there any rules around buying properties in a self-managed super fund?
There are, Charmaine, and I think there are certainly some pros and cons. And that's where we'd always suggest people to get advice, not just from us, but from yourselves as well, your team. Because the last thing we would encourage people to do with a prospective property purchase in a super fund is look for any logic or rhyme or reason or consistency in the legislation, because it is just a minefield. Every now and again, one actually pops up that a tricky little rule or if I may call it a silliness as to what you can and can't do. So definitely just doing that extra check that what you're buying is appropriate and going to work for you and your family over the longer term. I can't endorse that concept enough.
Fantastic. And look, if you don't quite have enough money in your superannuation fund, I mean, can you combine super funds? Can you combine with your partner to get the 150,000 together? Can you do it with people that are outside your family? Are there any rules around that?
So you can have up to 6 members inside a self-managed super fund, and you can combine your balances to then go out and purchase property together. There are no rules, so to speak, in terms of who you can bring into your self-managed super fund. You can do this with people outside of your family, but we usually call them self-managed super funds or family super funds.
Yep.
That you want to bring your family in and build your family's wealth.
Got it. So if you are thinking of perhaps doing like a JV, a joint venture with a mate or a friend, and you wanting to buy property together, you could potentially roll your superannuation into a self-managed super fund and buy as a joint venture from there. Is that correct?
That's right, Charmaine. And I'm just going to add to that. You're spot on. You can certainly do all that. I'm just going to add to that something that's really important to us. We've got so many clients that are families, and we often use the phrase that your kids won't do what you say, they'll do what you do. So the ability to share this knowledge that you're accumulating in your investment journey with them, and even better, bring them along for the ride and really get their hands dirty, get them involved in the whole process. That creates that intergenerational legacy that I think we all strive to build.
Fantastic. And just a reminder, everyone that's watching tonight, please get your questions in, because this is your golden opportunity to get some advice from Luke and Rayden tonight. And I mean, tell me, like, when we're talking borrowing capacity, so is there a different rules for your borrowing capacity if you're buying within a self-managed super fund versus buying perhaps in a personal name, or will the borrowing capacity be exactly the same? Like, how does that kind of work?
Fortunately, in a self-managed super fund or family super fund, there really aren't that many moving parts. So we're not financiers, we're not lenders. We stick to the strategy side of things, and would certainly recommend anyone going down this path to get that advice as early on in the process as they can, as we know they do with you and your system. But from a self-managed super fund perspective, you've got contributions coming into the fund that will be mandated by law. Your employer has to put those in for you. That's the 10% of your wage that goes off every week or every fortnight. And then in this situation with a property strategy, you'd have the rental income coming in as well, the prospective rental income, which the financier would consider as part of how much to lend you or how to lend you to overall get that strategy off the ground for you.
Fantastic. And I mean, tell us, I mean, share with us, what are some of the benefits in buying a self-managed super fund? I mean, is there any perks to that, especially when it comes to retirement?
Yeah, very much so. In a self-managed super fund with a property strategy, becomes a very good tax environment. So in terms of tax, once you hit the age of 60, you can actually pull money out of your self-managed super fund tax-free.
Wow, fantastic. And what if you were to sell the property? Is there any different perks there if you were to retire and decide you wanted to sell the property, or?
Yep, we can sell the property tax-free after the age of 60 in a self-managed super fund. There's an ability to offset some of that tax as well. So there's definitely a number of strategies that we can roll out if a client wants to go down that path.
Got it. So, I mean, we know there's some benefits in having a self-managed super fund, obviously, when it comes to retiring. But if you're still young and you're buying in a self-managed super fund, is there any limitations to your self-managed super fund?
It's the limits are your own imagination.
That's a great answer. What do you mean limits? There are no limits.
We've got clients pursuing some weird and wonderful strategies, and I think for so many people, it's empowering to know that they really do have that unlimited range of options that they can invest their money into, whether it's Some people dabble with cryptocurrency, for example. And we always say don't put it all in there or do any strategy like that. But it's just the knowledge and the power that you can go down this path. And I think so often we're told what we can't do, especially up here in sunny Queensland at the moment. We're often reminded what we can't do. But this is one of those times where, and look, Charmaine, we often are reminded. We try and be as balanced as we can when we're talking about these sorts of structures. They're not for everyone. Some people, for example, the ability to do whatever they can with their money. It can be, the analogy I like is the pie on the windowsill. You need to be careful. You can't eat into that money earlier than the law allows. And there are some strategies that people really need to get some help with so that they make sure they're doing everything correctly, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. That applies to so many investing strategies. And as long as it's viable, as long as we've got a clear plan as to how that's going to work, we love to support people with getting things going for them and their family.
Fantastic. I mean, just touching upon that, if you are buying a property in a self-managed super fund, I mean, how does the equity work? So, if the property grows in equity and you want to pull some of that equity out, is it locked into the self-managed super fund, or can you take it out and use it for a property in a personal name? How does that work?
That is one. Remember earlier, Charmaine, we talked about these inconsistencies, these niggly little parts of the strategy that still eat at us. At the moment, under current rules, you're not allowed to refinance to access that equity. You can refinance a loan, you can move financiers if that's the right thing for you to do. But in terms of accessing that equity, that is something that we're constantly frustrated about. And I've been saying for probably 3 or 4 years now that I think that part of the rules will be reviewed at the very least. So that's certainly watch this space part of the strategy. And that's why for so many clients, the traditional concept of taking out a loan and paying it off versus utilising offset accounts or other investments just to keep that available money if they're looking to continue to grow their portfolio, which so many clients are, and continue to invest. They just have to keep that in the back of their mind. And that's why we're here. That's part of our job, to establish those bigger picture goals and make sure they don't do anything to shoot themselves in the foot.
Oh, fantastic. And so I guess the same thing goes with the rental income. The rental income would go directly back into the self-managed super fund to really replenish those funds. Would that be a fair statement?
Replenish and nourish.
I like to nourish. Let's just nourish our money and our finances.
Yeah. Look, the contributions that you've got coming into the fund, for so many of our clients, that the rent and the contributions they've got coming in, far exceed the costs of running the strategy, the fund, the property investment. So it means they can just fast track their journey to another investment, whether that's another property or another strategy. It just means that they keep growing.
Fantastic. And one of our listeners has a question, so I'm going to just share that into chat here. So if you buy in a self-managed super fund, can you also set up via the self-managed super fund for your total permanent disabled income and protection, etc.? And that is from Dave.
Yep. Thank you very much for that question, Dave. You certainly can have those insurances inside your self-managed super fund. We can hold that life or death cover, TPD, and income protection. By having those inside that structure, you can free up your cash flow so you don't have to pay it out of your back pocket. And we also like to keep everything under one roof, so it makes life a little bit easier when you do have it inside that one structure.
If I may, Charmaine, just add to Luke's comments there, that's such a massive frustration for us when we see a client who, for no good reason, is paying thousands of dollars a year for life or TPD insurance in their own names, which is not tax deductible, when they could be paying for those premiums in their self-managed super fund, where the premiums would be tax deductible. So often, and it's We don't dwell on this with clients because quite often that's been happening for 10 or 15 years. They've been paying thousands of dollars a year in premiums that could have been going into their home loan. When we can, with a few strokes of the pen, we can have that policy restructured or reviewed and paid out of their super fund.
Fantastic. So just a reminder, everyone, this is your opportunity to ask questions. So please keep them coming through. Tonight's all about you and helping you gain some more clarity. We do have another question. So I'm going to show this question now. So why is it so hard to buy a property in your self-managed super fund?
So hard to buy a property. Well, we set everything up for you. We have a turnkey solution where people can come to us, and we end up working with you guys and being able to get clients into property. There can be some hurdles purchasing a property inside self-managed super, especially if you were to do it on your own. If you were to do it on your own, there's not too many lenders, and it can actually be quite difficult to source everything and set everything up in the correct way for you then to be able to purchase that property.
Some other, look, it's not to say there aren't frustrations, but the last thing, look, the reason those frustrations so often occur, and it's the same with any journey, any investment, people just haven't done their research up front or got the right advice, and they find themselves halfway, there's an old phrase, you can't be half pregnant. They find themselves halfway down the road, and they're still learning as they go. It's kind of like jumping out of an aeroplane and stitching yourself a parachute on the way down. Whereas if you've got that right advice up front, if you've spoken to the right professionals who are in regular communication with each other, we can certainly support that seamless solution. There are some frustrations where you need a 25, 30% deposit for some financiers, and that's where that hurdle compared with buying an investment property in our own names or a property in our own names, that is a larger deposit. But that's where, again, knowing these things up front, being able to do all of the numbers before you pull the trigger, really puts you in the box seat to execute the strategy rather seamlessly, especially with the right people by your side.
Fantastic. I mean, just on that, like I have seen sometimes that when people are buying property in a self-managed super fund, and this could be more for a mortgage manager, but sometimes the interest rate is that little bit higher on the loan when you're buying in a self-managed super fund versus in your personal name. Do you know much about that, or can you touch upon that a little bit as to maybe the reasons why?
Yeah, Christina, and certainly the deposit is higher. The security that the financier will have is limited to that property. So they don't have security over the entire or the fund or the other assets of the fund. But Charmaine, I've got to comment because this is you're proving here, and the questions that are coming through are just really showing how important it is to have all of those professionals. And there's not that many, but having the ability to have those open and the open communication, that instant ability to just pick up the phone, speak to your mortgage broker, speak to your advisor, and just have the comfort that those people are collaborating, that they're working together. And the notion of having a team working with you to knowing the outcome that you want and getting you over the line. Whereas if you had a particular mortgage broker who wasn't perhaps communicating with your conveyancer, that one frustration can cost you delays and money. It's just so important. It's funny how it's difficult to answer any one part of the process without stepping on the toes of another professional in the process, and that just speaks to how integral it is to have those right people by your side.
Yeah, and we touch upon it in our membership and having the circle of safety, and having certain members in the circle of safety. They're really here to do most of the heavy lifting for you. They are our team of trusted experts that are here to ensure that every step is interconnected. And I think last time we spoke, Rayden, we talked about the difference when you have a team that are just making noise in a band versus actually playing a beautiful symphony, because all those moving parts are connecting together to really help that progress to be as smooth sailing as you possibly can, versus all this ruckus and loud noise and no one really communicating and talking.
couldn't have said it better. I mean, it makes all the difference.
And we have another question here. We've got the minimum 150,000. How is that related to percentage of the gearing for the loan? That's a great question. Thank you very much, Chris.
That is a fabulous question. Just as a very general rule, Charmaine, we're such. Well, I'm a very boring person. Luke lives a far more adventurous and exciting life than I do. But if you were to say, as just a rule of thumb, a $350,000 to $400,000 property working on a 25% deposit, you start to see how those numbers play out. So on a $400,000 property, a 25% deposit would be $100,000 plus some costs you're going to have depending on the state. You're going to have different rates of stamp duty, transfer duty, some legal fees, some conveyancing costs. And then we love, this is such a critical axiom for us, we just have to see clients retaining that cash buffer. Anything over 20K is ideal. And it's just for no other reason than the unexpected. If we can, there's that one-off bill that you weren't forecasting, they're always the ones that hurt the most.
Fantastic. And we've got another question. I love the name here. We've got Space Monkey 688. So the question is, what about transferring an existing investment property into this fund? Can it be done?
There would be some frictional costs. It can be done, but it would be more costly than to pursue something separate.
Got it.
We want to look at that scenario and figure out what our options were, but it would be quite difficult.
Yeah. As a general rule, residential investment property, so an investment property someone owns, it's purely residential in nature, very difficult to, if not impossible, to move that into super fund. But certainly commercial properties, anything connected to a business, that's one that we'd want to have a chat about to not only make it, because there's the question, isn't there, Charmaine? It inherited every question. Can I do it versus should I do it?
Yeah, it's a great way of thinking about the scenario. So really weighing up those pros and cons as to whether you think you should or whether it's really going to be beneficial and so forth. Great. So we have another question here. So if someone already has a self-managed super fund, can they buy a property with your help through this, or do I need to open another self-managed super fund? I think Russell, you're one of our members, is that right? If you could just type in the chat if you're one of our members. And we've got, why do super funds hold your super money hostage and make it difficult to roll over into a self-managed super fund? They don't want to share the money.
Yeah, no. There's everyone has their own sort of reasoning as to why this one might be, but it's how the big super funds make their money. They like to have a large pool of money that they can then invest, and then that's how they make their money. So when it comes time to rolling over that money into your self-managed super fund, they like to hang on to it for a little bit longer.
Fantastic. And another question from Dave. Dave would like to know, what are the approximate self-managed super fund setup cost, including ongoing costs per year, etc.?
Yeah, great question, Dave. There's a couple of ways to look at this, and I'll give you the numbers in a second. But for so many people, they've become accustomed with super funds to having a percentage-based fee. So they're used to having 2 or 3% of their fund paid out as a fee. And whatever you do, and if there's some existing clients watching along, they'll know about this story. Never look at the front page of your statement to get any sort of an idea as to what fees you're actually paying. In fact, go to the very back and work your way forward, because normally towards the back of the statement is a truer indication of what sort of fees you're paying. And remember that so much of the fees that you pay are debited or deducted from your account before the performance of the fund is declared. So you don't get an invoice, you don't get an itemised bill that you then authorise for payment from these other super funds. They just take it all off the top. So it's quite normal to see fees of 2 to 3%. So if we go back, that's in the existing super funds. In a normal retail or industry super fund, that's a very average fee. So seeing fees of 2 to 3%. So on a for a normal, say, I'll just work on a $200,000 fund, of course, or money, a pool of money in super, whether that's husband and wife with $100,000 each as an example. If that was a $200,000 pool of money, on 2%, that's $4,000 a year. On 3%, that's $6,000 a year. That folks find they're already paying, whether they realise it or not. That's the money that's coming out, and oftentimes there's a tax component that's being taken out of their account as well. Oftentimes people don't realise that's going on. So really important to know what you're coming from and moving into, because those fees going out, it's for a lot of people, it's shocking when they realise just how much is coming out of their accounts. And of course, because the fees are percentage based, as your balance continues to grow, so do the fees.
You don't notice, do you? It's like that full transparency. It's not like an actual figure. This is how much, it's costing you per year. You see that tiny little percentage and you're like, oh, that's not too bad.
Absolutely spot on, Charmaine. So that's where in the new structure, we have a solution. Everything's paid for by the super fund. By the way, there's nothing out of pocket, but it works out at a couple of grand to set everything up, to get everything off the ground and ready to go, to get you to the point where you're ready to start shopping. We say shopping for that's the fun part. Our stuff's just the paperwork and pretty boring. We can't deny the fact that the investment stuff's the fun stuff. But from there, you're looking at around about $3.5 grand a year after tax to run the fund. And again, that's where on a $150,000 fund, for an example, that's under 2%. Pardon me, a bit over 2%. I'm thinking the $200,000 fund. But our fees are flat, so that's why we don't talk in percentages too much. But that's why I think earlier there was a great question about a startup balance or how much to make the fund viable. That's where a key consideration is. We want to make sure that the wealth that we're creating is not being offset by fees and costs. We want to make sure you're growing your super faster than you ever would have in your old fund. We're here to make more money for Australian families, and we just want to run a really effective solution so that they can access these strategies that for so long have just been out of reach.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got another question here from Mark. If I buy just one property in a self-managed super fund, is there any ongoing input or maintenance from myself for the self-managed super fund, not the property itself? Great question.
Great question.
A few documents that we'll have to get you to chase up there, Mark. But for the ongoing running of the super fund, that's our job. So that's where we come in. And I was saying before, we have that turnkey solution where there'll be a few things that we'll need you to chase, but for the most of it, that's all on us.
Fantastic. And I think we've got another question here. What's the rough cost to add a member to an existing fund? So I'm assuming if someone's already got a self-managed super fund set up and they're wanting to add another member, I'm assuming that's what this question is referring to.
Charmaine, again, another great question, and this is
rolling, yeah. Loving it. Keeping you guys busy.
Yeah, Charmaine, this is where it's very easy for us to answer that. We don't charge to add or remove members, trustees, whether you're in accumulation phase or pension phase, whether you've got $200,000 or $200 million, it's a flat fee. So it just becomes more viable. The more money, the more members are in the fund. You can quickly see how the fee becomes infinitely more competitive than a lot of retail, well, the vast majority of retail and industry super funds, because it's a flat fee. So that's a very easy one. Any variations, to the fund, anything that needs to be done, we'd love to support that, and there's certainly no cost to do that. Look, I can't speak for other providers. I should keep it very general and say I'm sure other providers will be happy to charge you whatever you're willing to pay, but certainly with our solution, there's no cost for that.
Fantastic. I mean, I've got a quick question, and we touched upon it before with, when you do have a superannuation fund, a certain amount of money is being invested into different, various things. And I know that my question may differ depending on where the superannuation is invested in. But what are we looking at returns, versus having an investment property and working with your a superannuation for an investment property versus having your money in other little investments in a normal super fund? Is there much of a difference in the kind of returns that you can get, or is there any area that's a little bit safer than the other?
Charmaine, this is where the short-term benefits or the medium-term benefits become apparent, especially when you contemplate how gearing can work in your favour to grow your wealth much faster. As your members will know, it can be a tremendous way to grow your wealth much faster. Of course, for those people, the poor people out there who've bought properties in mining areas or just bad investments in the past, they've been burnt by gearing too. But when you're getting the right advice, when everything's being done the way it ought to be done, the way it must be done, needs to be done, and you've got blue chip assets that are just as boring as I am, just doing their thing, you don't need to worry about them. And you've got that long-term approach. You've got some cash in the bank just in case something does pop up. You can see how the long-term growth in a property that's got some borrowings working for it, perhaps up front, are going to far outperform the returns you'll get in any other industry or retail super fund. But Charmaine, I probably was a bit quick to answer your first question, because what you've just said then, or the question that you've asked, really speaks to what we're most passionate about. And that is that the outcome that we strive for with all clients is to create this regular, reliable, passive rental income stream, so that when you do flip the switch and retire, when it's no longer man or woman at work, it's money at work, they've got these boring investments ticking away week in, week out, month in, month out, paying a rental income stream, so that most importantly, they can retain the assets that comprise their portfolio and live off the rent. Where do people go wrong? This is probably something we should talk about more another time, perhaps. Where do people go wrong? Because how often in the workforce that we see someone who retired seemingly recently, 3 to 5 years ago, had the big party, and they're back at work, whether it's because of look, I pick on COVID. The better example would be the GFC, where markets fell, dropped. Australian stock market dropped by more than half over an 18-month period, and took over a decade to get back to its previous peaks. And that's where, if you had retired, slightly before or slightly after that downturn, you've just had 5 to 10 years of your life savings wiped out. So any retirement plans you had have just been completely brought undone. And that's where it's not saying that the property market will forever be immune to downturns, but it's saying that even if there was a downturn in the value of properties, you're still going to get the rent. And this is the part that so many people, when the penny drops, that no matter what happens to their portfolio over the next 20, 30, 40 years, they're still going to have this passive rental income coming in. And that's what's going to fund their lifestyle. It means that they don't have to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Whereas if you're in a normal fund and in a normal balanced type of investment where perhaps 60 to 70% of your money is in shares or listed securities that have fallen by 40, 50%, and you have to sell those assets to fund your monthly pension payments, you're going to hurt. And that's ultimately, if we could preach one message to the masses, that would be it.
Fantastic. And just out of curiosity, what is the retirement age these days? Is it still 65? It used to be 55, then it changed to 65. I mean, can you retire a little bit earlier, or are you kind of stuck at a certain age and that's the only age that you can retire at? How does that all work?
Look, you can access your super from about age 60. So it can be done from age 60. Yep. However, I think, unfortunately, for the majority of Australians, 67 is now the age they can access the age pension. So, again, for those clients of ours that are in their 30s, 40s or 50s, our big push is to make it such that when they hit 67, it's not a big deal, because that concept of an age pension is the last thought crosses their mind, because we want them to be privately funded and not waiting out or in line to get their hand out.
I've got another question out of curiosity, and this is something I was just popped into my brain. If you're buying a property in a self-managed super fund, and let's say that there's repairs or something that needs to be done on the property, does the repairs for the property come out of your self-managed super fund, or does it come out of your personal name? How does that work?
Yep. Everything that's associated with your self-managed super fund can be paid for by your self-managed super fund. So nothing ever actually comes out of your back pocket, which is fantastic. It essentially looks after itself.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And I've got another question here from Chris. This is a good one. If you have two members at different retiring ages and one retires and you sell the property, how is that divided? And is there tax involved to the non-retiring members component?
A great question, and we'd be happy to break that down for the client with a particular set of numbers, because there's a few ways that could go. And I'm going to answer that question, Charmaine, if I may, I'm going to speak to probably the greatest myth, and that is that everyone seems to think that the second you turn 60, superannuation by default will become tax-free. And it can, but that is not necessarily the case. And we, again, too often see folks who, with just a small rejig or a few strokes of the pen, could have made the entire strategy tax-free, but didn't. So there are ways we could manage that strategy. There are things we could do. Without the numbers, it's difficult to comment. But
of course,
that'd certainly be something we'd be happy to help with.
So realistically, like if you know you've got two in the self-managed super fund that are going to be retiring at different ages, this is why it's really important to actually have a strategy and have a plan so that you're really clear on what that's going to look like when the first person is retiring that little bit early.
Yeah, I think too often in life, people feel as though they have to make the decisions and then they will just check those decisions with a few other people or other professionals, or worse still, their mates at the pub, for example. And that's where, when you've got the right team around you who have known what your goals are next year, in 5 years, 10 years, and can just help and chip in every step of the way and keep you updated with bits and pieces, because unfortunately, superannuation law and look at how much we've spoken about tonight in just under 40 minutes.
I know we tried to kind of cram a whole strategy session into like a very condensed, 40-minute live, but I really appreciate you've done so well in being able to answer in as much depth as you can with some of these amazing questions that's come through tonight.
I appreciate it, Charmaine, and what alarms me when I contemplate that is how much of what we've spoken about tonight is completely different than what we would have spoken about 5 or 10 years ago. The numbers, as you've said, the retirement age, finance rules and regs, super law and regs, retirement age, it's all, I don't want to say it's constantly changing. It's just, the goalposts just get moved.
They shift every now and then, and it's important that you're shifting with those goalposts, because what you think is going to happen based on where you were 5 or 10 years ago may be very different based on what's happening currently, and so forth. So yeah, it's really important to have those experts who knows the changes and can keep ensuring that you're still working towards your end game, your bigger picture, your goals.
So well said, and we often use the phrase, we can't control the wind, but we can adjust the sails. And that's
I like that. It's fantastic.
We just have so much fun keeping up with all the changes that are constantly put in front of us. But that's our job, Charmaine. That's why we're here.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're almost come to the end. So if there's any last questions, we've got a couple more minutes to get those questions in, because after our session tonight, Rayden and Luke are going to be joining us in our private group, the Black Belt Investors, for our members only, and having our members do a bit of Q&A. So that's going to be really exciting. So if you have any questions, please type in the chat. Look, if you're out there and you're considering, buying a property in your self-managed super fund, or you want to know more about whether you have enough money in your self-managed super fund, if you just type in the chat, #wealth call, and one of our team members will reach out to you, have a little chat about your current situation, and just see if there's anything that we can assist you with moving forward. Space Monkey, I like Space Monkey. I just love the name. Very informative. Thank you. Fantastic. It has been very, very informative tonight. And while we're waiting for just some of those last questions, and is there anything that either of you just feel to add about the key to retiring early? Any kind of wisdoms or anything that you feel would be really beneficial for our members and for anyone that's listening?
Yeah. In the wise words of from Warren Buffett, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today.
Love it. No time like the present.
That's 100% right.
Charmaine, we've already said this, and I don't mean to sound repetitive, but for those clients contemplating retirement, I think it's so easy to chase your tail and pursue last year's winner, whether it's Australian shares, international shares, fixed interest, term deposits, whatever last year's best performing investment option in your old super fund is. I mean, that's one way to try and go about things, and it creates this very short-term view of what your money did last year and what you want it to do next year. And we just come back to this point. It is so comforting and empowering when people dwell on the passive income they could draw from their fund. If you didn't sell one thing ever again in your super fund, what is the income, whether it's dividends, whether it's interest, whether it's rent, it doesn't matter. What would that income be? Is it regular? Is it reliable? Is it inflation protected? If you've got that and that income is more than you need to live on, you are financially free. There might be an asterisk there that you've got to be able to access your super legally to do it. But that's once you've got that coming in, it's a beautiful moment, and that's all where that's our obsession, creating that income so that people don't have to sell down little bits of their super fund month in, month out to fund their retirement, because that's the promised land. So, Charmaine, by the way, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for your support. It's been lovely dealing with you and your team and your clients this last year. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you for letting us come on that journey with you.
Fantastic. Well, it looks like we've got no further questions, so I think we'll wrap up now because we need to get ready for our private group. So, on behalf of Positive Property, thank you both for tonight and sharing some really amazing words of wisdom and giving our listeners a little bit more of an insight on self-managed super funds and how it all works. So without further ado, Merry Christmas to both of you, and again, a pleasure. Rayden, this is our second time we've had a live together talking self-managed super funds, and it's great to have you along, Luke, as well. So for all our listeners, have an amazing night, and I'll see you guys in our next private group.
Merry Christmas. Good night.
Merry Christmas.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.
Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for all our listeners around the world. If you found this podcast valuable, please share with someone that might find this useful, and please join our tribe of purpose-driven investors, increasing income and impact in our Facebook group, Positive Property. Please note, with a multi-million-dollar property portfolio and a passive income, I've become incredibly successful in investing in property. The fact of it is, however, many people may find investing in property challenging. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of hard work. However, becoming educated to make an informed decision and having the right advisors gives you the tools you need to succeed. The most important part of this formula, however, is to actually take action and apply that knowledge. It is important to understand the information I share is of a general nature only and is not taking into account your unique circumstances. If you're considering investing in any asset class, you need to seek the advice of an independent professional advisor who will be able to look at your specific situation. Be sure your advisor has actually achieved the kind of results you're seeking. Many won't have, so beware. We've taken great care putting this educational resource together. We'd be surprised if you didn't find any errors or omissions. If you do, our legal team says we have to say we're not responsible for those. In fact, as with all things, even your success, we're not responsible. That responsibility always has and always will come down to you and the actions you take. We're passionate about supporting you in that process and helping you increase your ability to create wealth, live the life you desire, and provide all the things you dream of for you and your family.